Well, hello there, and welcome back to the very latest episode of my Love Machine podcast. Now, today I have got a wonderful topic for you. We've called this one Naked Attraction, and there are various meanings to this. We are talking about all the things that make a person attractive, whether it's personality, looks, charisma, sense of humour, all those sort of things. And also, for those that may not be aware, in the UK we have this amazing TV show called Naked Attraction, where pretty much it's a dating show where everyone gets naked. If you've not seen it, apparently you can look it up on YouTube and other places outside the UK, and I do recommend it. It's absolutely fascinating. We start off with screens, and I'll explain this to you in a second. Before I do that, I will introduce my amazing guest who I've got here to talk about this, an avid fan of the show apparently, and the creator and the host of the amazing Wine, Dine and 69 podcast, Rachel Dalton. Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here today.
I'm excited to have you here. It's taken me a long time to pin you down, and I've finally got you. So I'm hoping the connection works all the way from America to the UK, and it's all going to work absolutely fine. So how is your day going so far?
Not too bad. It's almost Friday, so I'm hanging in there.
Good. Almost Friday for me too. But every day blurs into one when you become a dating coach. But that's another story.
I feel like that's true.
It does. So tell everybody that's listening, how did you start a podcast called Wine, Dine and 69? And what exactly is the podcast?
Sure. So the podcast is, I say that it's a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. And I tacked self-love on there kind of recently. I mean, kind of within the first 6 months, I guess, of the podcast, because I thought it was really important to focus on that. If you don't have a base of self-love, none of those other things are going to be successful. And so a lot of my topics do touch on sex, do touch on relationships, but at the core is always self-love as the base. So the way that the podcast started is I was part of this kind of like Facebook group for women, kind of centered around self-love, actually. And I told the story I mentioned offhandedly and then was asked to elaborate on the time that I sent my boyfriend to the hospital from a blowjob, something called coital cephalgia. You can look that up. But basically it's a headache that occurs where the blood vessels in the brain kind of burst, and there's a risk of blood going into the spinal column, which is deadly. So we had to get him to the ER very, very quickly. And, people were like, man, you must be really good. Give us some tips. And I kind of realized that there was a need for that, kind of need for people to talk openly. So that's kind of where it started.
I love that. So that wasn't actually your fault, was it? This is something else that would have happened if you'd been doing it himself or anyone was doing that.
It could have been. I mean, I like to think that I'm just really good at what I do, but I do think that it was more of a him problem than a me problem.
But how do you know? Because headaches sometimes do happen during that situation, and it's to do with the blood. How do you know that you're not just excited, or how you've got some serious medical problem? Is there an answer?
Yeah, I mean, he said it's the most intense pain he's ever been in his life. It was a searing, sharp migraine. They needed to give him morphine in the hospital. It was so intense. He needed to be in a dark room with like a blindfold on. It was very, very intense.
So what were you thinking during this? Not during this, but after this.
Well, I looked at him at one point when, we realized he was going to be okay. And by the way, we're no longer together. That was maybe 7, 8, almost 10 years ago. I don't know. Yeah. But I looked at him and I was like, I guess I really must have blown your mind, huh? And he did not think it was very funny, but I did. So
no, but I think everyone somewhere has got some sort of story like that. I've got plenty of my own. I may have told you off podcast, but I'm not going to be talking about them on my professional podcast here. But I'm open to talk about anything, just not my sexual history, because that's one thing I'm not allowed to discuss, because
fair enough.
That's a long time ago when I've been single. So I have to think back. What I do now, I live through my clients and their strange stories that they tell me. And I can't share them because of confidentiality. So what we can do, though, is discuss the wonderful TV show, Naked Attraction. And because you're my guest, can you explain to my listeners exactly what the show is about?
Sure. So it's kind of the basis of the show is kind of based on attraction, physical attraction, and can a relationship be sustained when you're going based off of physicality. So there are different people in these different pods, they're different colored pods. And there's a screen that kind of lifts little by round. So like at first it's just like the lower half. And then it kind of shows like the chest area, and then it shows the head. And at each round, the person who is doing the game show, I don't know, the person who's doing it eliminates a person just based on it. And you would think that it sounds pretty awful and shallow, but you'd be really surprised. I mean, there are they're totally different types of people. There were amputees, there was a little person once, there was a couple seeking. You just really get a sense of how like there's really a lid for every pot, and there's no one type of like standard beauty. Like maybe you as the viewer may have your own, but that doesn't mean that it's the same as the person. And they have trans people, they have people who are bi. It's really, actually, I find it to be a very accepting show. Yeah, so
I'll tell you someone that finds it a very accepting show. Probably the show's number one fan, my mother. She's 80 years old and watches this program. My dad died a few years ago, so she watches this program, A Naked Attraction, and I find it hilarious that she watches it, because a lot of people won't watch it. They find it quite, I'm not watching that, that's embarrassing, who puts himself through that, I don't want to see naked people. My mum's very accepting and she watches it. And
I love that.
and my wife had never watched it until recently. We have lots of family dinners and we discussed this program that my mum loves. And I brought this up, and my wife watched it and she wasn't too impressed with it, because she thought, what's going on here? Didn't understand it. But from my point of view, as a dating coach, like you just said, I love the fact it's inclusive. And nobody is the same. Everyone likes different things. They don't always choose the most attractive, or what I would say is attractive, or the fittest body, or they go off personality and the cheeky smiles, don't they? And how many tattoos or piercings they might have.
Right.
So everyone's attracted to different things. Hence the subject, naked attraction, of this podcast. And we will talk about the different things people are attracted to, and your own story with that, if you don't mind, shortly as well. But let's talk a bit more about this show. I've got some questions for you about this, because whatever I say is whatever pops into my brain at any one time.
Go for it.
What sort of person do you think goes on that show? And would you go on that show?
I would not go on that show. It's interesting because for the person who like talks so openly about these topics, I think prude has a negative connotation, but I'm pretty private, like with my actual body and who I share it with. And I really hate that there is a stigma, and I've dealt with it in DMs sometimes, of people assuming that I might be a little bit more promiscuous than I am, because I talk so openly about these things. So no, I would not. But I do think that people who would are people who just are a little bit more expressive with their bodies, who, just don't care as much about putting it all out there on television. I don't know if there's a specific type of person. I also heard people say, like, I've tried everything else, let's give it a shot. So maybe those people too.
Yeah, I think people are becoming much more open-minded about what they might do. But there's still, for most people, I think would not go on that show. Because we've all got some degree of maybe body image issues, and you have to make supreme confidence. And you see a lot of these people thinking, how can they go on that show if they're in that look like that? But that's the wrong thing to look at, isn't it? Because these people are confident and happy, and they have self-love. If you haven't got self-love, you're not going to get past the test and the screening process to go on that show. So it's amazing how empowered you can be by doing that. And as you just said, maybe they thought, you know what? I'll give this a go and see what happens. Even if the person that's picking doesn't pick me, maybe someone else might spot me and contact me on Instagram or find me elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it can really work. What happens at the end of the show is that, those that don't know, once that person's got down to be completely naked, the person who's the picker chooses somebody, and then they have to strip off naked and they walk on. So it's only fair. Imagine that they stay clothed.
The picker and different people, yeah.
Imagine how unfair it would be if that person got to stay clothed. That would be a very different show, wouldn't it? And it wouldn't work the same way. So they're both open and free. And what I like about that is many of them do go on the first date to then have sex. Now, that's up to them, whatever they want to do. But I like the fact they've already seen each other naked. Because that's often a fantasy or the biggest fear someone has of getting intimate, that they judge me for my body, I think. Have you experienced that with someone yourself, when someone's nervous about that?
With me being nervous about
Not
my
with
body,
you
or
being
somebody
nervous,
else?
with somebody else. Because people
Absolutely.
it's a common theme, isn't it?
Yeah.
People do. People want to have sex in the dark. They want to just be very, very, very nervous about it or go under the covers. But for this situation, they're removing that barrier. And maybe that's wrong or right. I think sometimes that's good to anticipate, a bit like Christmas. You get any Christmas present unwrapped, but you may as well, unwrapping it is the part of the fun. But I love the fact they do that. And it's not always them, because then they go on a date and they decide they want to see each other again. And many of them don't. They realise that looks aren't enough and personality is more important.
Yep.
It's not just about looks. So I want to talk to you about all the different things that people might find attractive. So
Yes.
it could be sense of humour, it could be, like I said, personality, good with kids, good with money. What do you find attractive in a partner?
What do I find attractive? So I think like the interesting caveat here is that I have recently been exploring demisexuality,
Mhm.
um, and trying to decide if I might fall under that umbrella. I mean, it's a spectrum, right? So figuring out where I fall on that spectrum, if I fall on that spectrum. And basically the conclusion that I've come to is that looks do matter to me. I have to have like a basic, I have a base attraction to people, but
Mhm.
that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to be intimate with them. So, like, I was speaking with some friends and they said, oh, like, I would just walk around and if I saw an attractive person, like, and they suggested going home and having sex, I would do that. And I was just like, I can't fathom that. Like, that is insane. I can't imagine, doing that with somebody that I don't have a connection with.
Yeah.
Um, so emotional connection is really important, but I do find in comparison to some other people who identify as demisexual, that looks do play a role for me.
Yeah.
Um, Sense of humor, being able to laugh. And I really, if you look at all of the people I've dated, the one thing that they have in common is they are all very, very smart.
Hmm.
So a little sapiosexual too.
Yeah. That must make it hard for you, because it's quite niche what you're looking for.
Yep.
Because you want the emotional connection, which is what someone who's demisexual primarily wants, isn't it? For those that don't know, it's not doesn't mean you're half sexual. Someone asked me the
Yes.
other day, "You're demisexual, you're only half sexual. What does that mean? You're sexual on weekends and not during the week?" Someone genuinely asked me that question. But it means you want someone with emotional connection and you want the looks. So how do you get round that with a partner? Obviously, you're attracted to them first of all. How do you then explain to them the situation that you're not going to just jump into bed with them? Not assuming that anybody would, but you see what I mean, don't you? How do you communicate to them what your needs
Sure.
are?
Yeah. Well, I took a dating long hiatus after my last relationship ended a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
And when I got back out there, this was something I really had to consider. And frankly, like I just kind of came out and said it. I'm not really one to mince words. I'm very like willing to be open. And, a lot of people had questions about it and, try to explain it to them. And I mean, most people like didn't care and were like, oh, like that's important to me too. And I'm like, yeah, like they're like, I'm picky too. And I'm like, yeah, it's not really the same as being picky because it's sexual attraction does not exist until you have that emotional connection. So yeah.
But if you have to be attracted to somebody first, there must be some degree of lust that comes into that.
No lust,
No?
just looking at somebody and saying that person is objectively an attractive person, but I do not want to sleep with them.
That's what most married people have as well. I think really, you can window shop and appreciate someone that looks nice, but you're not going to
Yeah,
act on it, and you don't necessarily think, "I want to
exactly.
jump into bed." So it does make sense to have that. So you need that requirement, and that is an important part of any serious relationship. I think to have the emotional connection.
Absolutely.
There are so many different levels of any relationship, but so if you met somebody who you are attracted to, how would you? How long does it take before you might possibly form that connection, or do you give it? How long would you give it? Because some people only go on one or two dates and then give up. How long would you give it?
So it's interesting. Generally, it would, in the past, it's been like months, a few months.
Yeah.
But my last relationship and the person that I am seeing now, it was actually more quickly, but that's because the emotional connection was almost instant. Um,
So that's possible as well.
it is, and I think it takes a very special type of person. I dated a number of men, this fall when I was dating around, but there was only this one person that I was like, there's an emotional connection and there is a strong physical connection. And so in that case, it just took a few dates. But I also think that because I had been celibate for a year, that I really needed to get it out of my system to make sure that I was being objective, and
Right.
looking at being able to say like, okay, like, are we compatible in these ways now that that's out of the way? So
That's a good thing. So, where did you meet them, may I ask? Was it from
I
an
met
app in real
them.
life?
Yeah, it was an app on Hinge.
I love Hinge. Hinge is my favourite one. I mention that so
Yeah.
many times on this podcast, and they still haven't contacted me to be an expert for them. So I must contact them directly at some point to do that. I think Hinge is the best one for the reason that you probably said. It's a lot easier to get to know someone if you make the effort than it is on other apps. There's more filters. It's more serious, isn't it?
Definitely, definitely.
Is that your favorite? Was that your favorite app?
I mean, so I'm very limited, I guess, in my experience. My last relationship was my first ever online date. I decided to do online dating, first online date, bam, done. And
Wow.
that was Coffee Meets Bagel, and that lasted for 4 years.
Yeah.
Um, but then, so I've done Coffee Meets Bagel, and I've only done Coffee Meets Bagel and Hinge, and I really liked Coffee Meets Bagel because you're picking from men who have already said yes to you.
Yeah, it never really took off in the UK in the
No,
same way.
no,
It didn't. It's not as good. People don't really talk about it. There's so many apps that come and go over the years that I
it's
think
true.
there are only three that really sort of stay, and that's Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge. They're the main
Yes,
ones.
yes,
And people always ask me what my favourite ones are. You may as well go where the numbers are, unless you want something a bit niche. If you want something a bit more niche, there are apps for that, and niche
right.
apps can work really well. So when you met this person, I don't need exact details, but how quickly did you know that you had that connection? Is this by the text messages, by a phone call, by real life meeting? How did you know you had this connection?
Well, the first tinge of it was that he sent me a voice memo.
Right. Okay.
And
Good.
I was
Yeah.
like, so I'm a singer, right? Like I'm really into
Yeah.
to vocal stuff, and I like voices. And so he sent me a voice memo, just like telling me a story. I was like, oh, like I really like his voice. He has a really nice voice. So it was like the first, like, huh, okay, like this guy was moving to the top of my list in terms of people that I was most interested in meeting up with. Oh my gosh, he's gonna
Yeah.
listen to this and be so excited. But and then when I met him, it was within the first hour that I was like, I want to kiss this person. And I don't generally have that experience.
Wow.
Generally, I'm like, do I want them to kiss me? I don't know. How do I want their tongue in my mouth? I'm not sure. But like with this person within an hour, I was like, yes, I do. I would really like that.
I love that. I love that. I love the fact you mentioned voices as well,
Hmm.
because I think the power of the voice. And now I'm doing my voice now. Now my voice changes into my old actor voice when I have more resonance in it. And this is my proper podcaster voice now. I found the voice has always been very powerful for me over the years because, particularly over the phone, I've done voiceovers and things like that. Women seem to love it, and people love the accent and things like that. But this isn't about me. I want some general voice notes are something that I really want to understand more of on the apps. And maybe you can help with this, maybe you can't, because all my clients ask me, should they use the voice note feature? And we play some of the messages. Most of them are absolutely terrible. They are saying silly jokes, they are making comments, and you can't judge what they're like based on the voice. So, what do you, when you've heard some good voice notes, what would they be that you like? And did you have a voice note?
Okay, so I don't think that I liked any voice notes that people sent me that people had on their profile, right?
Yes.
I don't think I've liked any of them, but I do like the ones that people send me when we're in the middle of a
Right.
conversation and they send me something direct. The best voice note that I've ever seen is my own, um,
Or heard. Yeah.
which they were like, "What's like something you're really good at, or what's your superpower?" And my
Yeah.
answer was that I am very empathetic and a good listener and a good friend. I said it way more eloquently than this. I practiced a little bit before recording it. And I said, my friends call me emotional Batman because I am very good at interpersonal relationships and understanding people. And then I
Yeah.
tagged on saying, I also have a fantastic singing voice and would make a really good karaoke partner.
But that's interesting, you see. So that's going to get
Hmm.
attention. It's better than saying this is how you pronounce my name or the other prompts that they
Yes.
give you for that, which is so dull.
Yeah,
I
people
have
liked it. It went over well.
yeah. I may have mentioned this before on the podcast, but 15 years ago when I was last single, which seems like yesterday, 15 years ago, Match.com had a feature where you could ring up a number and you could leave a voice message on there and hear the voice. And no one was doing that at the time. And this is when I used to be an actor. And I forgot what I said now. I used to get so much attention because I was using my actor voice and getting people to listen. Because it adds an extra level to the communication, doesn't it? Which is good.
Absolutely.
But I find in real life now, I hate voice notes, personally. Because I hate them. I have to get them right and perfect them. If I can't be natural and just leave a voice note, because I'm a perfectionist. I can write messages, have a phone call, do a podcast, do these things all normally. But I have to record the podcast twice without even doing it. Not the podcast, the voice note twice without even doing it. Do you find you do it naturally?
Most of the time, yeah, unless I'm being particularly vulnerable in the voice note, in which case I might record it a couple times to make sure that I'm expressing myself correctly.
Yeah, I've used it to reach out to people on Instagram before, maybe to guest on my podcast or to work with them, and it's always worked really well because someone's done it to me, and I thought that's great. It makes a difference, makes you stand out. And I would love to be able to do a voice note for all the people that message me and ask me questions, and I never get time. But I suppose it's easiest to do that than it is to start writing messages and do this. So I might get into that more. But
Yeah.
so what can people do in terms of attraction and voice? What could somebody do in their voice notes? When I say voice note, I mean voice prompt, really, don't I? On the dating apps, what do you think would be attractive to somebody to say something? Yours is great, and you've got a great podcasting voice, so that's great. But for the average person who isn't used to this and comfortable, what could they say to be more attractive?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a theater major as well, so I totally I get it. You're just built for podcasting. I would say that your voice is your voice, right? And I think that my advice, so you can't really it's this person's going to go on a date with you and you're going to start talking, and so you don't want to disguise your voice or catfish with your voice or anything like that. But I guess my advice here would be the same in general for dating apps. I think that in terms of voice notes, people go, oh, I don't want to take this very seriously, or I don't want to make it look like I care. And I think that's the case for dating apps too. A lot of people just kind of, you want to be joking and everything, but you also want to have one prompt that if you're looking for something serious, makes it very clear what you're about. My profile was very fuck boys did not swipe yes on me because it's just people tell me I give off a wife vibe. They're like, you give off a wife vibe. And so
is that good or bad?
I think that it's meant that I've been in a string of very, very long-term relationships. But it just means that I'm devastated when they don't work out.
Fair enough.
I was so close to the ring. But yeah, I think that people just don't be afraid to actually talk about what you're looking for. Don't be afraid to, your voice note doesn't need to be a joke. You can have a little bit of a joke in there, but your profile doesn't need to be super jokey. Be honest about what you're looking for. Don't be afraid, because if people are swiping no on you, that means that you're getting people who are actually interested in what you're about.
Completely agree. I think be natural. Say something that's about you and personal to you and why someone would want to date you. I was getting all these thoughts in my brain there of really inappropriate voice notes and things you could do, and really creepy ones like, I want to play a game, things like that.
Don't do that.
Imagine that, doing these creepy voices. But that's just me. I wouldn't do that on a dating app. That would be freaky. Singing, karaoke. What would you sing? What song would you sing as a duet with somebody on the first date? Yeah.
I would say Dirty Dancing. I've had the time of my life.
Yes. That's a great song, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's always, people really like it. And everybody knows it.
Everyone does. How well they sing it or not, I don't know.
Yeah, see, that's a thing for me too, is if somebody is a good singer,
it's attractive, isn't it?
It really is. And because I was a musical theater major, people, if somebody's a singer, I go to Broadway shows and I just get little tingles, and I'm just ooh, and people are that is so weird that musical theater turns you on.
I love musical theatre, and for a straight guy, I don't mind admitting it. That's my own background as well. I love it. And years ago, I used to date somebody for a little while, and she was an amazing singer, and she had albums, and she sent me the latest albums. I'll be the first person to hear them. And I used to play them all the time. They were incredible. And then years later, when I was with my wife, this woman appeared on X Factor. Do you know X Factor?
Yeah, I do.
She appeared on there, and she's on there. And we're still friends. I don't talk to her very much. It's slightly inappropriate now. But sure. I remember her voice was the most amazing thing. And she would sing songs, not for me, but she'd do that and sing them in real life. And I used to get her albums. And I miss getting the albums because they used to be great at Christmas, having them. But I think the power of a voice, that's really, really attractive when you're singing as well. It
Hmm.
can convey so much, and I think singing's very emotional with certain songs. It can be a bit cheesy. I'm all about the cheese. I think any of these things. I love singing, and I find that I sing if I'm happy. I sing if I'm sad. If I'm
Yep.
not singing, something's wrong.
It's a good way of expressing yourself for sure.
It is. I have to. My kids get a bit annoyed by it sometimes, usually in the car. But let's go back to attraction here. Making myself laugh now, which is not good. But what other things do people find attractive? I think sense of humour is one, isn't it?
Sense of humor. I think work ethic or
Yeah.
people's ability to really be dedicated to something. Like people who aren't able to see something through, you don't really have very much faith that they're going to be able to see a relationship through.
Yeah.
Um, I really like somebody who's passionate about something.
Yeah.
It doesn't even need to be something that I'm passionate about. Just be passionate about something.
Yeah.
And I think a curiosity is really that's another thing that a lot of the people that I have in common have. A
Yeah.
desire to learn, a desire to,
To improve.
mhm, yeah, a growth mindset.
Yes, absolutely. People always ask for that, which is good when they come to me. Everyone wants that. Everyone wants certain things. I think kindness is quite an attractive thing as well. But there are
Yes,
balances of that as well, because you can be too kind and then we take it for granted. But I think kindness
yes,
and respect, all these things. But passion is one you mentioned. I think just being passionate about wherever you're passionate, it shows that you are keen to do something. You're not just sitting down all day doing nothing, bored and hating your life. And it shows a degree of self love as well. I think self confidence and self
hmm,
love, they're slightly different, but they are the same thing. And they're the most attractive things as well. If you can, like we mentioned before, back with naked attraction, if you are comfortable in your own body, comfortable with who you are, and it is quite a rare thing that someone's completely like this, then
yes,
because people often pretend, don't they, that they're self confident, they lie to themselves and they say I've got really high self esteem, but the slightest bit of rejection comes along and they take it so personally.
yep, yep.
That's it. So I think we lie to ourselves sometimes. So I can see through all this, but
That's the true
how?
test is when you're in the lowest point, do you still maintain that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I talk about self love a lot and self confidence on this podcast. But do you have any advice for that? Obviously, you've worked on that yourself. You said.
I have. I do a lot of like workbooks. I have a picture of little me of I think I was like 11 or 12, a
Yeah,
little picture in the corner of my mirror in my bathroom.
yeah,
And whenever I go to the bathroom and, wash my hands, I see it. And it is an important reminder to be kind to myself because that's who is really me. Because I would never talk to 12-year-old me the way that I talk to myself now. I also started this thing last year where I kind of, when I'm driving and I'm commuting, I kind of imagine little me in the seat. And, you know, little you may be really hard on yourself, but little you would be so proud of the things that you're doing. Like I was sitting on my roof one day and I was imagining little me, and little me would be like, oh my gosh, you're living in a city, you have a glass of wine, and you're wearing heels on a roof. That is so cool. And I was like, yeah, that is pretty cool, isn't
I was doing that myself. I had my heels on the other day in a glass of wine, but on the roof,
it?
not really. But I think that's a really powerful thing to think about because I've got little me's already. I've got my two children, and I see
Right.
sometimes if I'm in a bad mood, I think it reflects on them. I need to make sure and realize they think I'm amazing. They don't see my flaws, maybe my singing, but that's it. But then they take you completely when you're young. You don't have the same sense of pressure in your life. You've got anxiety in different ways, but you don't really feel that need. And I think as you get grown up, you carry these wounds that you have as childhood. So it's important for childhood. So it's really important that you look back and tell yourself good things, look after your kids. And in your case, it's good that you're doing it. It's exciting to go back and just be nicer to yourself. Because if you're not nice to yourself, who else is going to be?
Yeah, and it's the same thing. Like you would never talk to your best friend the way that you talk to yourself. I
No.
also do this exercise where I tell people, go to the bathroom every morning, look in the mirror, and say three nice things about yourself. Does
Yeah.
it can be as small as like I like that I'm kind, or I like. For me, for a while, it was I like the birthmark that I have like on the side of my by my lip.
Yeah.
I was like, it's very French. And so I that would be it for like a few days, but then I would be able to move on and be able to see other parts of myself in that way. So just you really have to make it a practice.
I do that quite often myself. I go through all the things that I like about myself, and it's a gratitude list in some degree, which is important. But I add things to it about myself. Like I like the fact I got my freedom, and I'm kind, and I know things and I can do certain things. And I'm a good dad. And I know all these things. Just to appreciate them, because it's subjective what these things are. But if you've got to believe them yourself, haven't you? And I
You
think,
do. And I think I actually did this exercise. I created a recalibration list. Um,
what's a recalibration list?
yeah, so it's I have a piece of paper and I've put it in half, hot dog, not hamburger way. And that's how
Yeah.
it was in grade school.
Never heard of that.
And
But
really, the way that you fold paper, if you fold it the different way, it's hot
we
dog
weren't
or
allowed hot
hamburger.
dogs and hamburgers at school. But that's another story.
But yeah, so I would
Hang on,
fold
so
it.
go back 1 second. Can you explain that to me again? How do you fold a bit of paper, hamburger, and
So
yeah?
if you fold it lengthwise, like you fold it in half, like kind of like a book lengthwise.
Right. So I've got a bit of paper here,
Yep.
like a
Yep.
book. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Is that
So
hamburger? Is that is that hamburger?
that's hamburger.
So what's
So
so hot dogs like that? I
yes, you got
fold
it.
it. Oh, it's very simple. Okay, I understand now.
You got it. You got it.
No one will see this, but everyone at home, we're getting a bit of paper out, doing hamburger, hot dog,
That's a
and
hamburger
they'll
hot
screw it
dog.
up and they'll say, "What's that? An onion or something?" I don't know. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Go on.
No, 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 you're fine. But on one side I have like a recalibration list, which is a list of all of the good things about myself. And
Yes.
whenever I'm feeling down, I revisit it. And on the other side of the paper, it's like the things that I want to be in 5 years. And I
Yeah.
kind of, when I start my day, I try to embody it's like I'm an actor, right? So it's like I try to embody the character of me from 5 years because, as Cary Grant said, you kind of have to fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not always true. There's nuances there, but that's another story.
That's how I
Uh,
started, but that's a long time ago.
you have to, so I kind of try to embody that side of the list. But if I ever falter and I'm not able to, feel like I'm embodying or becoming that person that I want to become, I can revisit the recalibration list. And the beauty of my experience with this was that my recalibration list and the things that I like about myself is a lot longer than the side of the list of things that I want to improve or be.
That's the way it should be.
It is. I
It
didn't think
is.
that was the way it was going to be, but that is the way it is.
I think lists can be very, very important out there.
Mhm.
Do you have any other sort of daily rituals? I always ask my guests that.
Daily rituals. You know what? Like the biggest thing that I do every single day is before I go to bed, I take 5 minutes to pick up whatever isn't away and I just put it away 5 minutes. Because for me, I really like having an organized and decluttered space and it helps me to have a decluttered mind. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, I just take 5 minutes and everything that I like took out or, moved around, I put it away. And I also get my bag ready for the next morning too.
That's good. I like that. Some people like that. They want to get rid of clutter. I don't see mess as clutter sometimes. For example, you can't see this, but my office, there's loads of books, everything's on the shelf. That to me isn't chaos. And I really ought to sort a lot of this stuff out, but it's just a reminder that I have so much going on. I should be grateful for it. And even my desk now, I can see different notes. You can see probably see some of them. My diary, all these different things. But maybe I ought to do that. Maybe I ought to take your advice there and tidy up a little bit. I'm always being told to do that. But I'm
I
saying all this.
mean,
I'm looking down. There's boxes down here that need to be sorted out. It's probably a mixture, isn't it?
it works for different things work for different people. For me, I just know that
Yeah.
like I can go to work and if I know, like I know that I left two dishes in the sink that I was supposed to do last night and I didn't do it and it's kind of bothering me.
That bothers me as well. Now I think about it. If my wife does that and she has a meal after I've gone to bed, for whatever reason, she's been training, comes back, I have to come downstairs and wash that plate up if she's not done it because I don't want it to
Yep,
be
there
there.
you go.
Yeah, so maybe I'm more aligned than I think I am on that. I think I just like to have books around and papers because I think books are important. It's all information and knowledge, and
Absolutely.
I'm a sponge for knowledge. Hence, I do this podcast. I want to learn from people and share with people, which is amazing. But we are coming to the end of this podcast already, and
Oh
we've
my
not
gosh.
even you've not even shared any of your sexual misadventures or anything.
I mean, I think the biggest one is the hospital visit. That's honestly the biggest one.
Yeah,
I feel like I had an instance where my blood pressure like dropped dramatically after sex once.
yeah.
And that was really, really scary.
Wow.
Uh, but those are like the two big things that occur to me as like things that are worthy of mentioning.
I think anything sort of sexual health scares are never going to be good, whatever it might be.
No.
And it can go very wrong. And there used to be a TV show, I may have mentioned this to you before we did the podcast. It was called When Sex Goes Wrong.
Oh,
All the different
yes.
things that can happen. I'm sure you probably had it. And I dated someone on that show a long time ago. All things can go wrong. And that is part of the fun sometimes of it. Because it's not perfect, is it? It's not like you see on Pornhub or YouTube
No.
and other sites.
And you have to learn how to laugh. Like you need to have fun. It doesn't need to be so serious.
And that is exactly what I think the most attractive thing is to anybody. People that can have fun and not take themselves too seriously and be willing to laugh at themselves, each other and the world. And there's nothing more attractive than that, I think, really.
Yeah.
Which is just as well, because that's what I do every day. So I absolutely embrace that. But everyone finds different things attractive and different memories, and it all makes up who we are. So thank you so much, Rachel, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I know we could keep talking, as I can with many of my guests, but I realise you're really busy. You've got to go back to work. So thank you so much. And then we'll talk again. Have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to give you a free copy of my latest book, which you can download right now from my website, jamespreece.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could share the love by taking a few seconds to write a positive review on the iTunes store right now. See you next time.